It's March 10th, 1977. Albert Spaggiari is handcuffed and taken to the courthouse in Nice, France, to be questioned by the investigating judge. Up to this point, Spaggiari is still a wedding photographer and a nobody in detectives' eyes. Little did they know who they had in their hands was the mastermind behind the biggest bank job in French history. A holdup straight out of a novel, literally. An almost perfect operation during which this goofy-looking photographer vanished with over 35 million euros in today's money. From a regular dude to the most wanted man in Europe. How did he do it? Who was he really? And how one simple mistake led a perfect bank job to crumble. We modeled the entire thing to tell you about the fascinating story of Albert Spaggiari, the brain behind the biggest bank heist in 20th century Europe. On July 19, 1976, in the early afternoon, a rumor circulated in all the newsrooms of France. The Nice branch of the Société Générale had been the victim of a burglary over the weekend. Millions of francs had allegedly been stolen. Alerted by the radio, dozens of clients gathered in front of the establishment. Panic took over the usually calm streets of Nice. Everyone is trying to get information. Frustrated by not getting access to their safes, clients threaten to attack the director. People are afraid of getting financially ruined. With all that chaos outside, inside the bank, things are much calmer. Investigators are shocked by the scene they just found. Hundreds of safes are empty, broken open with a sledgehammer or cut with a blowtorch. Losses were estimated at 46 million francs. That would be worth 35 million euros in today's economy. Authorities were confused how this happened. What surprised investigators even more was the equipment the burglars left behind: a table, a gas stove, saucepans, bottles of wine, cans of ravioli, and pieces of bread. The weirdest combination of items they'd ever found in a heist scene. Even stranger, investigators found a handwritten poster on a wall which read, "No arms, no violence, no hate." A message left by the robbers. In a corner, they discovered a hole drilled in the wall. A policeman squeezed through it. He crawled for a good minute and landed in the city's sewers. The tunnel is about 8 meters long. Masons have completely cemented the walls to prevent collapses and facilitate the passage of bags filled with precious objects and banknotes. A professional, well-thought execution. At that moment, investigators knew this wasn't a random bank job. They were facing the biggest challenge of their careers. If you ever wondered how these animations are made, they usually involve advanced 3D softwares that take years to master. But if you want to make cool storytelling videos with beautiful visuals without having to learn complex softwares, VidAI is the way to go. All you have to do is go to the software, create new, select any of the pre-made prompts from trending topics, or select a custom prompt. Pick the style you want, duration, font, and other parameters you want to change, and click generate. In the matter of seconds, VidAI will generate your video. You can always ask it to change things until you're completely satisfied with the result. Don't let technicalities stop you from telling the stories you want to tell. Try VidAI by clicking the link in the description and get $32 off your monthly subscription. In a humble country house in the outside neighborhoods of Nice, Albert Spaggiari lives with his wife and dog. Just a few years back, he got a camera and taught himself how to take professional pictures. Soon later, he became the town's designated wedding photographer. A wife, a dog, a country house, and friends who all agree he's a chill dude. But Albert has a problem no one knows about. The south of France is a calm rural place, especially at that time, almost too calm for Albert. His search for excitement led him to gambling. What started as occasional gambling sessions quickly transformed into an addiction. But gambling wasn't the only thing Albert hid from his circle. In fact, he'd always been troublesome. In his youth, Spaggiari experienced imprisonment. In 1953, he was sentenced to 5 years of forced labor for robbing a brothel in Indochina during the war of independence. At the time, he belonged to the paratroopers battalion and frequented far-right circles. Almost 10 years later, in 1962, he joined the ranks of the secret armed organization, a small group campaigning for French Algeria. This earned him another prison sentence for possession of weapons and explosives. He received a 4-year prison sentence, which he served in the Beaumetz prison in Marseille. Released after 3 years, he fell into oblivion. But how did Albert end up in France's biggest heist? One day, Albert picked up a book, Tout ça l'égout. An English author recounts a bank robbery where the robbers break into the safe through the sewers. That was Albert's aha moment. Days passed, but he simply couldn't erase the book's story from his memory. In March 1976, Albert decided to take a shot at the impossible, rob Nice's primary bank, something that's never been tried before. But he had a plan. To explore the possibilities, Albert knew he had to be close to the action. One day, he finds an ad in a newspaper of a commercial studio for rent, just a block away from the bank. He uses every franc in his savings to rent the studio for a year as a shop for his photography gig. To analyze the workings of the bank, he opens an account and makes frequent visits. He looks at how many security guards are there, how many employees, where they store big deposits, and how noisy it is during working hours. Sometimes he deposits some money, other times he withdraws to avoid any suspicion. But Albert still doesn't know anything about the safe. He recalls that one day, a friend who'd worked at the bank told him that the vault didn't have an alarm system. Its 1.8 meters thick concrete walls were supposed to be sufficiently protective. To assess the feasibility of his project, he visits the sewers located near the bank. After several nights of exploration, he concluded that it was possible to dig an access tunnel that would lead from the sewers to the vault. But such a task is impossible for one man. Spaggiari needed a team, but not just any team. He recruits a crew of petty criminals, 6 men tied to a French paramilitary organization. The men were mostly from Marseille. They needed to be from out of town, so no one could recognize them in Nice. Early April 1976, the men started digging. The sewers were about 10 meters away from the vault. Although that's not a lot of distance to dig through, the crew had to be super quiet. During the day, the inside of the bank had bad acoustics, which meant any noise coming from the street would raise suspicion. During the night, the 2 security guards would sit outside and chat for hours, which also meant any noise would bring the whole operation down. The crew was forced to only use simple manual tools and carefully dig in absolute silence. They used rubber rafts to keep water from coming up, inflatable mattresses to take periodic rests, and placed hundreds of meters of electricity cables coming from Albert's studio to light up the tunnel. They even laid carpet on the floor. The crew would then spend months digging at night, 1 centimeter at a time. It would take them 3 months to reach the vault. On July 16, 1976, during the long weekend of Bastille Day, when most locals were on vacation, Spaggiari and crew broke into the bank's vault. They spent hours picking through 371 safe deposit boxes. They stole an estimated 46 million francs worth of money, securities, and valuables. It was the largest heist in the history of bank robberies to that date, escaping the scene the same way they got in, leaving behind a message for the media and detectives. Each of the 6 men went on their way, while Albert Spaggiari abandoned his accomplices to go on a dinner date. The plan worked perfectly, at least for now. Shortly after the bank job, Albert Spaggiari decides to break up with his wife and flee to the United States. With his pockets full, he took the opportunity to live the high life. A big home in Florida, fancy dinners, and designer shopping sprees. After all, no one suspected him, at least for the moment. Because 3 months later, his ever-expanding ego led to him making his first big mistake. He organized this burglary to line his pockets, but also to let people know what he was capable of. Convinced that his profile might interest the CIA, he went one day to the offices of the agency, where he presented himself as a mastermind of the heist of the century. Except, nothing went as planned. The agents had no intentions of hiring an individual listed on Interpol's most wanted list. They reported Spaggiari to the French police, At first, their message fell on deaf ears. At that moment, French investigators were on the trail of Gaetan Zampa, the head of the Marseille Mafia. Spaggiari slipped through the net, but not for long, because a few weeks later, an unexpected event occurred. Two of his accomplices were arrested in possession of gold bars from the Nice heist. Following intense interrogations, they mentioned Spaggiari's name. Although all of this was happening back home, he had no idea about it. He took a plane to France to visit friends and family, but was immediately arrested upon his return. But the story doesn't end here. Having trouble coping with his detention during his interrogation, he escaped after 5 months by jumping out of a window right before the judge. He fell 4 floors below onto the roof of a car, bounced, and ended up on his feet without a scratch. He then ran to a waiting motorcycle, climbed onto the back, and fled the scene. Albert Spaggiari is officially on the run. All of France was fascinated by the story. His eccentric behavior appealed to the public, especially when it was reported that he had sent 5,000 francs to the owner of the car he had landed on as compensation. Spaggiari developed the image of an honorary bandit. However, French newspapers kept pushing the opposite. They wrote that he committed this heist to shore up the accounts of several far-right groups known for being openly pro-colonialist. Armed with a fake passport, Spaggiari managed to escape to Argentina, where he lived comfortably on a vast estate he acquired with his share of the loot. There, he took the opportunity to change his appearance. He grew a beard and underwent plastic surgery, allowing him to travel from one country to another without ever being questioned. Brazil, Chile, Spain, and Italy. He even made a detour to France as if nothing had happened. He lived for a time in a tower block in Puteaux, a suburb of Paris. Spaggiari also took advantage of his time on the run to write a highly successful book, The Sewers of Paradise, which was later adapted for cinema. In 1983, wearing a wig, he even gave an interview to the French journalist Bernard Pivot from his then hideout in Italy.
Bien, vous avez réussi le casse du siècle, mais quelles ont été vos motivations profondes?
Je n'ai pas de motivation familiale ou idéologique. Et puis, j'ai toujours cherché des trésors.
Spaggiari was on top of his world, but in the meantime, justice has not forgotten about him. He was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment. As for his accomplices, whom he never denounced, 5 of them were caught. Their sentences were less severe, only 8 years in prison. This cat and mouse game would last 12 years. 12 long years, during which Robert escaped all police operations. And by the end of the 1980s, his case was no longer of interest, apart from the police, of course. In 1988, ruined and forgotten by all, Albert tried to negotiate his return to France in exchange for a sentence review. To do so, he contacted celebrity lawyer Jean-Louis Pelletier. But against all expectations, the French justice system flatly refused. But that was still not his biggest problem. At the same time, he learned he had incurable lung cancer. On June 10th, 1989, Albert Spaggiari died in Belluno in northern Italy. He was only 56 years old, a sad end without glory or crown for someone who sought to become a legend. Subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.